So if you've tried and failed with systems in the past, it might not be your fault. You might not be the right person to implement systems culture in the team, and that's okay. You just got to recognise who you are. You might not have found your Melissa yet. So I know some people brought their key execs, but it might still be you. But this is a great step for you if you haven't yet made that jump to find the person who fills that role for you. And then have them, the operations manager, direct the team and help to systemise. And that'll be a critical step for you moving through to that next level. That was the bit that allowed me to kind of step back and get new perspective on the business and think more objectively now. The business can operate over here. I can stand over here, look from the outside in, see what's happening. And I look at businesses differently now. I didn't have a name for this, and you've heard me mention visionary and integrator a couple of times. I'm borrowing that from a book called Rocket Fuel, written by a guy called Gino Wickman. Has anyone read that book, Rocket Fuel? It's a really good book, scribble it down. Traction is the other book that he's written. Has anyone read Traction? I think I might have asked that, so a couple have read Traction. But it explains this relationship between the visionary and the integrator. And now I use those terms just because when I read that book I was like, oh wow, this is Melissa and I didn't even realise, and apparently it's quite common across lots of different businesses to find that relationship. But it's usually you hear about the visionary, you never really hear about the integrator. The visionary is usually the person that's in the limelight in the front of the business that everybody knows. Then you've got the integrator who's usually making sure the business continues to run, but they're usually the unsung hero. Visionaries, they're the ones that have this drive and passion and their creativity, and they're a problem solver. They're great at launching things. They're quick with ideas. They excel in the early days of business. But as I mentioned earlier, sometimes those skills and habits that you develop end up being the things that hold you back from moving through to that next level. It kind of just gets reinforced. So as your business matures, that's when it'll start to stagger unless you plug someone else in to take over and fill that role. Otherwise, you just end up juggling too many things, and everybody, particularly as a business owner, you'll have a unique skill, your unique ability, Dan Sullivan calls it, where you're really good at a particular thing. We want to make sure that you've got enough space to work on whatever that particular thing is. If you get stuck in the operations, and as that business matures, and if you don't have the operations person, you'll be just stuck on the tools, doing it, servicing the clients, and then you don't actually have the space to work on what you're really good at. So that's where that integrator comes into place. An integrator is someone who complements you where you're weak. They're detail-orientated, organised, great with managing team, trustworthy. That relationship you often have to build up over time. Melissa and I and her husband, we were business partners in that rock and roll clothing music store, and then she had done some other bits and pieces, and then she came back on and started doing some article writing, and we built that rapport up over time. And then I was like, oh wow, you're better at this than I am. I'd grown the business to one side, and it's almost a little bit embarrassing and humbling to say that Melbourne SEO Services runs better now without me than when it did when I was in there. And I don't know how it happened. I built up this ego thinking that I was doing something magical, but she runs it better than I ever did and more profitably. So finding that person is key. And the more I started to do some research, there are quite a lot of businesses that exhibit this visionary integrator relationship. They're just oftentimes not talked about as much. Up on the screen, we've got Walt Disney, and he had a brother called Roy. Did anyone know that? Yeah, so the brother Roy was the integrator. The visionary was Walt. You look at Henry Ford, he had James Cousins, which is, again, his integrator, that person who would handle the operations. They wouldn't have built Ford Motor Company into the company it is today without the two of them, the pair. Ray Kroc and Fred Turner. Has anyone heard of Fred Turner? So Fred Turner is, well, we know Ray Kroc, he's the guy who started McDonald's, or at least that's what you think, but there's two of them. There was Fred Turner as well. So this relationship in a lot of great companies starts off with the visionary and the integrator.